The next person and our last patient storyteller today will not be a stranger to any of you. We all know Paul Kidwell as a MassBio champion and volunteer. We know him as the PR rock star for our industry that he has been over the last number of years. But many of us have not heard his story as a husband, father, and caregiver, and he's here to share that with us today. Paul.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I just thought that my epitaph of caregiver, husband, and father would not be a bad one. And I do come to you today as a caregiver, and I'm going to share a story, just a snapshot of my life and my experience with that, and I'm calling it 13. When a boy is 13 years old, the world expects two things from him: serious or silly. Not too old to cast off their childhood ways that they have spent the last decade perfecting, and certainly not mature enough to be enshrined into adulthood. When my wife was diagnosed with Parkinson's, one of the first things we talked about was how to share that news with our then 13-year-old son. We debated how much to tell him, the timing of that discussion, and whether to tell him at all. At the early stage of her illness, the symptoms would be imperceptible and not very apparent to him, at least for now. We thought that maybe it's better not to burden him with information that he couldn't easily process and let him enjoy his teenage years. We also knew, however, that there was never going to be a good time or a best time for this, but there should be a time. Parkinson's was something he had heard of, but clearly had no idea how serious the illness was. Predictably, he was upset when I told him that his mom was sick, hearing that she would probably not get better and that there was nothing that he or I could do to make her better. I was touched by his love for his mother and for me when he asked if there was anything that he could do. I told him that if his love was enough, Mom would not have gotten sick in the first place. If his love for her and us were enough, she would probably be cured today. Now, as a father, it's up to me to decide how much information I tell him about his mother's illness. It's also my place to help him process the emotions that I know will surface during and after our conversation, and to answer the question, what's wrong with Mom now rather than later when her illness becomes more pronounced? So here's what I told him. I said, your mother has Parkinson's. It's a neurodegenerative disease of the external nervous system, mainly affecting the motor system. He's a bright kid, so I injected a bit of scientific and medical jargon and told him that what he would see from time to time with Mom would be tremors, and that these symptoms of the disease result from the death of dopamine-generating cells, or apoptosis, in a region of the midbrain. Funny, he actually made up a little rhyme around this word, hocus pocus apoptosis, which made me grateful that the knucklehead was still alive and well inside him. I told him also that most people contract Parkinson's well beyond the age of 50, but with Mom, she was one of the unlucky ones who was diagnosed at 47, and that her form of the illness was called early onset Parkinson's. Not great news for a 13-year-old to digest, and who just wants his mom to get better. I told him that there was no cure for the illness and none in sight despite much ongoing research, and doctors can only treat the symptoms of the illness in an effort to give patients a better quality of life that allows them to function normally. So even when it looks like there is nothing wrong with Mom, the disease still lives inside her. And this is when he started to cry. Now, I know those eyes, and I could see beyond the tears and tell that he was more than sad. He was also scared. He was 13, after all, and his teenage instincts were no match for the adult information I was asking him to digest. What I did not tell him, however, is that his mother's condition could probably lead to some form of dementia. I also kept from him that the illness would probably shorten her life. I kept from him that I also have doubts sometimes, actually many times, whether I'm equipped to take care of Mom's needs. What he didn't need to imagine are my hours of quiet desperation, sleepless nights, and self-doubt. He was just a kid, and the burden of caregiving is an adult notion. maybe we'll have that conversation someday. But the most important thing I do tell this 13-year-old is that when he sees his mom in the grips of this punishing disease, when she has difficulty walking or getting in and out of the car, or in time, even remembering things that she once found familiar, that this is not who she is. It is just her illness. I tell him that to understand Parkinson's is gaining only a small piece of what his mother goes through each day. I tell him that when he sees his mother having difficulties, that's all it is. She is not suffering, only having trouble with the moment. And I tell him not to think about what we have lost, because there are things that we will never reclaim. Like yesterday, they become part of our history. But even though she has lost a part of her life, she will never lose our love. I really wanted him to understand there is nothing more courageous in life than loving another person by being there when they need you, even though the situation may break your heart. And I also wanted him to know that on the other side of heartbreak is wisdom. And at his age, I wasn't expecting him to be wise. I was only expecting him to be 13. Thank you.